Do I Do It?
Welcome to episode 5 of the Do I Do It podcast. We are over a month into the project now, which has been super exciting. We're very grateful for all of the people who have been tuning in, all of the new people who are here. But today's episode is going to be just a little bit different.
We're the guests.
So it was time for us to introduce ourselves, talk about why we decided to create this podcast, why we decided to do it, and then talk a little bit more about our artistic backgrounds.
Yeah. So that's the nature of the episode today. You're gonna hear kind of more of the behind the scenes. And I think we've got some questions for ourselves, but it'll be interesting to host but also be guests. So we'll try it out. But the whole idea behind the podcast is organic, natural conversation in our living room. And so we're going to try and do that.
It's a little harder because of the fact that we know each other so well. Yeah. I mean, that's one of the other things, I guess, is that we haven't talked about is that we've been together for almost 5 years. Mm-hmm. So we do know each other very, very well.
Yeah, and we film and host in our flat in London. Yeah. But it's interesting to try and change this environment into something more public, I guess. Yeah. Is what we're doing, is turning our living room into a public space.
Yeah. Well, and I think the other part of that, I mean, with the purpose of this episode is we talk to artists, we have all these questions, we dive into it. And one of the reasons that we're so interested, I think, is because of the fact that we are artists ourselves.
Yeah.
I feel like that's hard to say that I'm an artist.
Yeah. No, it is. Well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about our backgrounds.
Sure. Do you want to start?
Sure. Yeah. No, just thinking about the identity of an artist. I mean, I've been playing music well before I met you. When I was, the story goes back to when I was 13. I had this excellent grade 7 teacher, Mr. Kinanan, and the story goes basically is 13-year-old Theo, socially awkward.
A little angsty.
Very angsty. So I started to, that was the first time in my life that I began to experience mental illness. I'm diagnosed with depression. And that was when that started in my life. And it was years when I was, 17, 18, that I actually became properly diagnosed with depression. And then even later that I was medicated for it. So that was the really unfortunate, it's not unfortunate because it's part of my life and that, but that was the kind of dawn of that experience for me. But the reason I bring that up is because, in grade 7, I really didn't have a lot of friends, and I didn't have a lot of confidence socially in that. And I spent a lot of time by myself at recess and that kind of thing. And I just remember one day in the middle of the winter, the Saskatchewan winter.
So cold.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I won't dwell on that.
Dark and cold, and just fueling any kind of depression that one might have. It really adds to that. Anyway, I came to school one day in the morning and I walked into the classroom, and there was a drum set at the front of the classroom. And I had never I'd never seen a drum set before. I didn't grow up around a lot of music and a lot of we had a piano in our house, but that's it. And I just remember walking in and just feeling this magnetic pull, a curiosity, right? And I walked up and I was like, what's this doing here? Why do we have a drum set in our classroom? And there were a couple of guys in the class that could play the drums. One of my really, really close friends, actually, shout out Brandon Hunter. I credit him as being my first drum teacher.
That's amazing.
But he was kind of oh yeah, I play the drums, and he was messing around on the drum kit a bit. And I'd never talked to him before. And I kind of went up to him at recess or something. I was like, can you teach me how to play the drums? And he was like, the weird kid was Brandon can, this is all apocryphal. Brandon can like either verify or unverify me, but this is my perspective is like the weird kid was bothering him. But I continued to just pester him, over and over until finally he like sat down. He's like, fine, I'll teach you a drum beat. And he shouldn't have done that because, from then on I'd bother him in like, we'd be in the computer lab and I'd come up and be like tapping like with my hands on the counter or something. Is this a good, like, do I have a good beat here, Brandon? Or whatever. And but I was so it was like it was really life changing for me to be exposed to music at that time in my life, and I was like completely caught by it. And eventually, like a year later, I saved up money, like working construction with my uncle and that, like doing like, you know, whatever kind of jobs a 14-year-old
yeah,
does.
little odd jobs like 14-year-olds.
Yeah, and I saved up enough money to buy, I think it was like a $200 or like $100 Pearl drum kit. Like, and my parents were like not excited, so I really forced it. But since then, I just played the drums like every day for hours and hours in the basement. Eventually, in high school, I joined a punk rock band, which was amazing.
And you guys recorded an album.
Yeah. So music, like basically, I guess the thing is that music has been the original artistic form for me since I was quite young. So we
I think also with drums too, it's a very unique instrument because it's not so much like reading notes and that kind of thing. I think especially, I mean, you've tried to teach me a little bit of drumming, and I feel like it's very intuitive. Like, you can obviously learn it, it's a skill, but I feel like, especially at the beginning, you either are going to get it or you're not.
Yeah.
I've really tried, and I don't think that that's going to happen for me.
Yeah, I think that there's, you know, I became later interested in my life. Like, so in Saskatchewan, there's a really vibrant Indigenous community, the Cree people. And the Dene, but like, so we've had the most kind of contact with the Cree culture, and the spirituality in First Nations, Canadian First Nations culture is that the drum is a sacred instrument, and it
like at powwows, it's like I get chills.
Yeah,
it's very like emotional. Yeah. It's very, I mean, I really love experiencing it. It's like, and it is very unifying, you know what I mean? It's something that it's like everybody can feel it, everybody can experience it.
Yeah, but the spirituality is that like the drum is, well, it's the heartbeat, and I think that that's one way of explaining it. But there's this idea that the drum is somehow a part of like the origins of creation, and so there's something, like you say, like intuitive, and there's something very natural, they're instinctual about the drum. And I really connect with that idea. Like I took drum lessons way later, but for the longest time, and I still like, I don't know like rudiments or anything like that. So everything for the most part about my drumming is very self-taught. It's very like instinctive.
But it's really good. I mean, that's the other thing that like,
Thanks.
I know that you're not going to say that, but like, because you're typically very humble about everything that you do, almost to a fault. But I think like, I mean, anytime I've seen you in like playing shows or even just in your parents' basement, like it's really good.
Oh, thanks.
And you can play things like, I think one of the things that I love that you do is that you'll like listen to the music in your headphones and you'll play along with the drums and kind of like do your own kind of fills, or you'll learn fills by ear and that kind of thing. Yeah. But it is very much, I mean, that's like a huge passion, right? Not everybody would stick to it like that and be so self-taught.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, no, I miss it, like, because we you know, our flat here in London is it's small, and
we're above
a coffee shop. We're above people.
Yeah, so like we're above a coffee shop, but then there's like a flat in between us and the coffee shop.
So there's just no opportunity for a drum kit.
About sound and that kind of thing.
But I'd like to get back. I did I was in a band with in high school, and we had quite a few lineup changes. But I sort of my ride or die, Nick. My ride or die, Nikolai. There you go. That's
I love
rhyme.
that.
We were in the band for years together, and it was a punk rock sort of. It sort of transitioned into more like an indie rock emo kind of thing. And yeah, we recorded an album that's on Bandcamp still, The Puppets. Like, I'm shouting out that project. Like, go and listen to it. It's good. But yeah, Nick
I
is...
think also, like, impressive for, like, a high school band in, like, 2015, or I guess it was, like, 2012, 13, 14.
Yeah.
15 kind of thing, right?
Well, we did everything from scratch.
Yeah.
Like, it was... I look back on it now, like, years later, and, like, I was talking to you the other day about how much work it was and how dedicated the three of us. So Nick, myself, and another guy, Rhett Schroeder, we recorded the album together. And like Nick built a computer from scratch.
Incredible.
Like he built, because we decided like we needed to have the best setup for recording and that. And so he like bought parts for a computer, built it.
That's crazy.
Bought all these microphones, like really like high end, like proper recording microphones, and everything.
That's like commitment.
Oh, it was astonishing. Yeah. Like to think like that. Basically, these kids did that, and we recorded this album in Nick's garage over the course of a number of months, and Nick was doing a recording, like a mixing course, and so he did all the mixing and all the mastering and all that, and we literally like it was insane. So he had this is in his parents' house, right? God bless Eva and Chris Lai for letting us do this, and they're so gracious to us. But we would literally take the computer, like piece by piece, down from Nick's room in the second floor of this house into the garage, set up the computer, set up the drum kit. You know, I hauled my drum kit from my house in my parents' minivan, and we set it up, and then we'd record for like 3 hours, and then we'd take everything down, haul the computer back up to Nick's bedroom and set it back up, and then he would do the mixing in there. Wow. There's a phenomenal amount of work and effort.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, and you know the great thing is like so with our podcast, like I've been doing the audio now, like the mixing and that, and I've been sitting here for hours again thinking and like mixing on the same software that Nick and I used, and just like thinking I was like that years ago and now years later, like that experience paid off because I sat with Nick so often. I mean, he did so much work by himself too, but I'd sit there and just like be a part of the mixing process, and like it rubbed off on me to the point where now I'm like confident with mixing our audio.
You've been able to help, like, or you've been improving our audio so dramatically because I mean that was something like I have never done any audio mixing or anything like that, and so I mean especially when we first started to do the podcast, is that I kind of felt like I could do it, or I was like, you know, it can't be that hard. We have nice, like, or decent microphones. These ones aren't great. That's a future thing, but we'll figure that out. But yeah, there's like all these things that I was like, it'll work, it'll be fine. But then when you jumped in and started doing the mixing and the audio, it dramatically improved everything, which I'm so.
And I'm not like professional. Like I've never.
No, I mean, like, there are professionals who have degrees in this thing, like, you know, or who have been working in the industry for X amount of years or whatever. So, but it's amazing that comes and follows back. Mm-hmm. It's so cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no. So I guess, like, honorary shout out or honorary guest for Nick's he's in Edmonton. We'll do this, as like a promotion, like check out his group, his band, Daryl Saves Lives.
We'll do a tag. Yeah,
we'll do a tag. Check them out. Nick went to school in Edmonton, Grant MacEwan, great music school in Western Canada. And like he's doing great. Like they're doing an excellent job.
That's so cool.
You can hear. It's funny, like, I'd love to chat with Nick, like, if you see this, and, you know, we haven't chatted for a little while since he moved, but like the quality of their songs is just remarkably good. And like listening it compared to the Puppets album, like you can see that progression too.
Well, I think that's actually such an important point because, I mean, we talk about this in all of our episodes really, is that like that whole progress about things not necessarily being perfect or like looking back, whatever. And I mean, that was 10 years ago, about that, around there.
The album came out in 2017.
Okay, so yeah, so like whatever, 8 years ago. Yeah. That obviously that's not going to be perfect. And you can, I mean, look back and be like, oh wow, like that was amazing, and that was a stepping stone to I mean where Nick is now. And I mean, you were in another band a couple years ago that also like it was this stepping stone, that kind of thing. You're working on a couple of music projects now with some people that you met, and we'll see where that goes. I mean, that's really cool to be able to look at it as each one being a project that's like moving towards
I'm so excited to have the opportunity, hopefully in London. Like, you know, we've talked a bit on the podcast about coming from Saskatoon, and the difference, but like one of the things about a huge center like this, and like think of like all the bands and artists and stuff that have come out of London.
Oh, for sure.
You know, one of my goals at this point, and I don't think it's like a dream, like it's an attainable thing, is just the possibility of like playing a set in London in like the East End or something at like a pub that the Arctic Monkeys could have played at. In fact, I know of like some pubs in London that the Arctic Monkeys played at, or that like, I don't know where Led Zeppelin played, but I'm sure Led Zeppelin's played. Like there's so many groups that have played in London, and like just the idea that I could theoretically play my drums on the same stage that like years before John Bonham played on.
Oh my
like,
gosh, that's crazy.
Man, like that's like, that tells you something about the difference of like where we came from, and just being in different centers. And that.
Well, I think that like one of the reasons that we moved was because we wanted a new opportunity and a new place to meet new people, kind of experience something new. And we've been able to do that, which is amazing. Like, obviously it's not easy. Moving here is one of the hardest things we've ever done because, I mean, aside from the cost of it, which is absurd, aside from the cost, there's also like getting settled, learning new systems. I mean, meeting new people, it takes time, and building community takes time. And we lived in Saskatoon pretty much, I mean, from the time I was like 7 years old. So like, yeah, it's kind of crazy to think about that. But
so I've talked about myself. I want to ask you now, like, to share your
well, I'll hop on the music train because
let's stay on the music train.
Yeah, and actually, I mean,
we have a great contrast.
We do
in that regard because I come from a relatively untrained background musically, and you come from a
ultra trained,
highly trained.
So I started playing piano when I was 3, and I hopped on the classical piano train my whole life. So I started playing in music festivals and in like the Royal Conservatory examinations, and kind of competitive that way when I was, I'm going to say 11, maybe. I think it was about 11. And then I moved forward and kept playing, and I went and I did my grade 10. So with grade 10, you can cut it in half. So because it's a massive examination, because the first half is all your sight reading, your training, that kind of thing, as well as studies. So you do 2 studies that you play. And then the other half, you play 5 pieces from across different eras. So you've got the Baroque era. Well, actually, the first one is a Bach specific. It's like only Bach. And then you've got Baroque, and then you keep going that way. Anyways, I did the first half. So I did the studies and that kind of thing. And then I finished high school, and I was in university, and balancing that was too much. because at the same time I had started my own piano studio. So I taught piano for 4 years. So I taught from little kids from 4 years old to, I think it was 18 that I taught. But yeah, I really did all the fundamentals. I had kids who did exams and did festivals and that kind of thing as well, which was great. I ended up playing for provincial festivals as well. So I played very competitively, but only classical.
Yeah.
I started to dip my toes into jazz because I do really like jazz. But I think because of the fact that I like the prescription of classical, that you can take something, you can learn it exactly how it's written on the page and then turn it into your own. Because I have very high levels of anxiety. So I really like being able to have something that this is correct and then you can kind of turn it into something. But yeah, so then jazz I was okay at, but the problem is that I can't improvise. I shouldn't say can't. I found it very difficult.
Yeah.
And I found it to be something that I didn't really enjoy, which, especially with improvising, you should enjoy. That should be really something that you like. But yeah, so I played all classical. And then actually, so piano was always that through line. And I would be practicing all the time. In high school, actually, I took spares so that I could practice and get my examinations and everything. And then... yeah, and I mean, because I had a very busy schedule with my piano studio that I was running, and I was working another job as well. And so, yeah, I took spares in the middle of the day in high school, and I got a key to my church, and they let me practice there whenever I wanted, which is amazing. There were times that I stayed there far too late, and then the alarm system went off, and then the poor caretaker had to come at like 11 p.m. and be like, why are you still here? But I would practice for like 6 hours a day. Because, I mean, especially at that level, you really need the time in there.
Yeah. Yeah. So like the thing that like I'm thinking about our two stories about with music is like what you've just said about the level of dedication and the level of like effort in that. Yeah. And neither of us were given any promise of being paid.
No.
Or any kind of like, there was no, so it's... I mean,
even in the festivals that I played in and that kind of thing, there was no like monetary compensation or anything. Yeah. It was very like, here's a certificate that you won first place or third place or that you participated or whatever it was. Even in the provincial ones. I think if you won a provincial one, I believe that you got a little bit of money or you got sponsored to go to nationals, but I think that was pretty much it.
But, you know, like, yeah, in both respects, there's no, so it's all very internally motivated. Oh, 100%. And I think that's always how, well, maybe not always, but a lot of artists that like have that experience of just being like driven by a need. Like for me, it was this like, yeah, like, so did you find that with piano, like what made you want to like work so hard at it?
What's so crazy about that, and as you were asking that question, I was thinking about, because I hated performing in front of people. I still do. I really don't enjoy it. Yeah. My hands shake.
Me.
Yeah, I don't enjoy it. Yeah. I enjoy playing for myself, by myself. Yeah. And that's it. Like I actually was my church pianist for like a few months and I hated it. I was not good at it because it was so stressful to me. Because I mean, I don't know what it is. And like the thing about it that's so crazy is that like I can get up in front of 100 people and do a speech or like run a lesson or whatever, because I've done that. I've taught all sorts of things and I can do all sorts of presentations. I can talk in front of a camera.
You also, like, this is some fun lore about Alayna. You were a professional bodybuilder.
Yeah, I literally walked on stage in a tiny bikini.
Yeah, and had people evaluating your appearance.
Yeah,
right?
and I was like, I
and like
didn't even
assigning marks to your appearance.
Yeah, I really didn't even like blink too much about that. I don't know what I mean. Like, obviously, it was a lot of work, but like that whole prospect, I don't know, it wasn't a big deal. But playing music in front of people is a nightmare for me. So I
wonder why.
I don't know, but actually, so when I played for provincials, I played a Chopin study. It was Etude in C sharp minor. I can't remember the number right now, but the thing about that is that I had practiced so much, and my piano teacher had gotten me to start practicing in the dark. So then that way I couldn't see anything that was going on, and she was like, I just want you to listen. I just want you to listen to yourself. And that helped so much, because then I stopped paying attention to what my hands were doing. And so when I played in provincials, I think I've told you this story, but I remember watching myself play from the corner of the room. It was like an out-of-body experience. And I played the best I think I've ever played in front of people.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't paying attention to what I did. I made one slip. I know exactly where it is. It's on the 4th page and like about the middle.
Wow.
I made one slip, and obviously it's fully memorized, so I know exactly where it was. But and that I went back into my body again, and then I was like hyper aware. But then I let myself relax again, and then I wasn't so much out of body, but I was a little bit more relaxed. But especially from the beginning into the middle section and that kind of thing, I was not inside myself. And I think that is something that, if I know the piece really, really well, then I can do that. But getting to that point it's a lot of work, right? Especially because the pieces I was playing are minimum 5 pages long. I mean, and you have to memorize them all, right? There were a couple that I was playing that were like 10 pages, right? Like they get into like really long pieces. But yeah, I think for me, the intrinsic motivation was that was my outlet in a way. And I played a lot of pieces that were very emotional. I love Chopin. Rachmaninoff is my absolute favorite to play. And Rachmaninoff has a lot of those like deep kind of chords, those really like beautiful melodies as well. I mean, especially listening to Rachmaninoff, his Piano Concerto No. 2 is stunning. And then the theme on the Rhapsody on the theme of Paganini, I cry like pretty much every time when we had them on our record player, or we had the vinyl of them. I would listen to them in the evening often or whatever, and it was like, that's the emotion of classical music for me is so internal that it's very hard for me to share
like
that.
Cathartic, kind of. And
I think that may be why, is that I don't like sharing that level of emotion with people, especially on like that level.
So like the thing is, because again, you have to work for that. So would you say, let me ask you, like, would you say that your study of, a given, like pick a Chopin piece or something like that, and like the amount of study and effort that goes into like doing it, like playing the piece, is in itself a process of catharsis and a process of like emotional sort of regulation or emotional realization, would you say? Like,
yeah, I'd say that's a good, I don't know if it's necessarily realization, but I do think it's, I don't know, the process of it is always different too. And every piece, when I'm learning it, has a different process, because sometimes I just won't even have an emotional connection to it. And that's where the process is a lot more arduous. Is that the word?
Yeah.
Arduous. But yeah, actually, I remember learning this Bach fugue once. And my teacher and I, she's incredible. Her name is Heather Waldner. She lives in Saskatchewan. She was my teacher for a very long time. But we actually we photocopied the music pages, and we went through with highlighters to go through exactly like where each of the melody points were, and like that way I could really visualize it. But learning that piece, I went measure by measure, and I would play the measure like 100 times, one single measure, and then I would add the next measure and play that together like 100 times. So then that way I could really feel the way that each piece went together. And so it was very much like building a puzzle. But then something like learning a Rachmaninoff piece, for example, you really have to focus a lot more on the melodic feel, or Chopin is the same way kind of thing, where you need to really focus on the melodic feel and the directional kind of way that you're going.
So like, yeah, I think that just like coming to the theme of the podcast, like this is a really interesting thing that you're talking about is, again, like why do we decide to pursue something artistic, especially like when you're I've never had that level of performance anxiety. Like, sure, I get nervous, but I'm always happy to share my music and my writing and my, you know, my artistic pursuits with people. But it's not, it really doesn't feel like that's the point to me. It's nice. It's nice to have recognition, to be able to share. There's something like, we'll talk about that, I think. But what I'm thinking is that for the artist to decide to do it, it's like there has to be something in it for them to begin with, in like a deeply intimately personal and private kind of way. You know, I think about like my dad, when he started, like he wrote poetry for a while, but then he stopped, and then he started back writing poetry again when he was sick he had cancer, and he went, and, you know, he was in the hospital and he was recovering from a surgery, and he started writing poetry in the hospital. And the beginning of that, like, was basically, yeah, like an outlet kind of thing. And my dad, he'll watch this. And I just want to say my dad's poetry is phenomenally good. Yeah. And he will not publish it. Yeah. I don't know why. And
I can relate to that. I mean, that's something that, like, we had a keyboard in our apartment in Saskatoon. Yeah. And there would be times that Theo would come into the office where the keyboard was when I was playing, and I would stop. Like, I would stop playing. And it would be something that I'd been practicing for hours and hours, and I could play it and do well. And Theo just wanted to, like, listen to me. And my mom talked about this actually a lot when I lived at home, because she would ask me to practice at home, and I told her I couldn't. I genuinely would practice at school, or I would practice at my church, but I refused to practice at home because I didn't want anyone to listen to me.
So I am thinking about this, like,
I did kind of overkill your story about your dad.
Okay, well, no, it's fine. I'm just thinking we can probably cut that, right? Okay. How do we transition back into, what were you just saying?
That I wouldn't practice at home.
You wouldn't practice at home? Private. Right, okay, 3, 2, 1. Mm-hmm. You know, when it comes to the privateness of art, and if we can agree that is something, there's something essential about that. Yeah. When it comes to this idea, like to this process of sharing with people, whether it's performance or whether it's publication or anything like that, what is, like, because that's not necessarily the motivator. Again, I don't want to pretend like we're speaking for all artists, and I'm not like trying to be judgmental or anything about if people are out there doing their art for the sake of like publicity and for the sake of money and that, and like that's excellent. Like,
well, but I think there is a part of artists where, like, they want to share what they're doing with the world in a very wholesome way, you know what I mean? And it's not necessarily even for money. We've talked about this before, where it's like, if you're doing it for the money, that's not going to be a path to success. But, like, I think the thing is like, there are some people who are a lot more willing to share and connect with people, especially on that. And I think that might come down to personality. Mm-hmm. You know,
certainly, yeah. No, I think it comes down to personality in terms of like how easy it is to get someone. I mean, I think of the example of like Franz Kafka.
Yes. I knew you were going to bring him up.
Yeah, well, it's such an amazing, or like I have loads of examples, but Kafka comes to mind because he famously told his executor and his best friend, after, like, for when he died, to burn all of his work. You know,
And we have.
and I've, yeah, like,
I'm like, where are they?
but you know, but the thing is that his executor didn't do it.
Yeah.
You know, and as a result, we have the works of Kafka. And that is a tremendous treasure to culture and to, you know, literary history, and that, like, it sends shivers down my spine to think of, like, oh my goodness, we could maybe not have that in the world.
There's lots of painters who have said the same thing, where it's like, destroy this or whatever, you know.
So many, like, there's countless examples of the unwillingness to share. On the other side, there's lots of examples of artists who are very, very comfortable sharing. But what I'm wondering is, when it comes to that, it seems that the dichotomy between the artist's own motivation to create and then the importance of sharing that, because I think anyone listening to our podcast and anyone we have on would very strongly think that it's very important that the arts are out there and accessible and available to people. Yeah. But so there's a dichotomy there. Yeah. You know, when you cross that line from private experience with your art, with your own creative process, you have to almost shift gears into a different persona in order to promote and to share it. And so what I'm finally getting to this question is, like, what do we need to see, or what do we see in the world that encourages that kind of promotion?
Well, okay, so on that, I think it's very different for each form of art. But at the same time, I do think that I think that they live one and the same. The whole presentation of it and that self kind of, or that independence of feeling with art. Because I think about, for example, a book. You could be in a forum where you're in a classroom, or you're at a writer's event, or whatever it is, where you're talking about the work. But reading is a very independent event. Yeah. Right? Yeah. The same thing with art is that you could go to a gallery event, or you could be in a classroom talking about it, or whatever it is, or you could be in an environment where you're learning to paint, or whatever it is. But when you and I go to an art gallery and you stand in front of a Francis Bacon, you're in your own world, you know?
So are you saying that, like, that's interesting. Are you saying that so that you have the inception moment of a piece of work?
Yeah.
And that's a private experience. And then there's kind of this transition to the public. Yeah. But then are you saying that then the individual experience of a piece is also private?
Yeah, I think
that's really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, because we went to a gallery event the other day, and one of the gentlemen that we met, he said something like that too. He was talking to the artist, and he was trying to explain how he felt, and then he said, "You know what? I can't. It doesn't matter the words that I use." Mm-hmm. He said, "We don't need words right now." Mm-hmm. Right, and that is a level of communication that's very different. You know what I mean? Like, it was about the painting that I said was my favorite.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's kind of interesting though. And we've gotten to lots of concerts, like classical concerts as well, because I love going to classical concerts. And there's been times where I've tried to, like, talk to you about it after or whatever, or like, what did you think about this? But that, to me, is not the same experience as listening to it with you beside me, for example.
It's a translation of something that, yeah, it's like, you know, when you think about, like, translating between languages,
which, I mean,
things get lost and the meaning doesn't become, it's not perfectly, you know.
Yeah, there's certain things that we can say in French that it doesn't translate well to English, or say in English it doesn't translate well to French, right? It's just, and
but I think even more dramatic in a way where, like, your experience, like, I've tried to articulate my appreciation for the artist Francis Bacon, and I can't. And I've tried lots of times, and I've come close, but there's something very unique and very private. Yeah. You know, that makes me think as well about your because your work with playing classical piano is it's maybe a really great microcosm for what we're talking about, because you're simultaneously enjoying the art and the work, the music that's been created by someone, but you're contributing to it in a unique way that's your own. And you're never going to like know what was happening, like what Chopin was thinking, or what he experienced when he was writing a nocturne or something. And you're trying to like relate to that in a way.
Which actually, my teacher made a really good point about that. Is when I was quite young, I played my first Chopin piece. And she said, I don't let everyone your age, because I was, I think, 12. And she said, I don't let everyone your age that I teach play this. But you have the emotional maturity and the like empathy to be able to play it. Because you can play the notes. The notes are on the page, right? And the dynamics are there, and you're like, whatever, all the little different pieces are there. But that doesn't mean that you're getting it, that you're like, your soul is in it, right? And that's something that my teacher was very, very good at paying attention to. I mean, actually, she was really amazing. She has a lineage. I still have this piece of paper, like the paper that she printed out with the lineage of the teacher lineage. And her teacher was Dr. Lyle Guston, who was one of the like best teachers in Canada for a long period of time. And his teachers actually track back to Beethoven and Bach, which is so cool. So my teacher lineage goes all the way back.
So you are related to Beethoven and Bach in
such a stretch, but
in a metaphysical kind of way.
Yeah, but I mean, in that kind of way, though, right? Like the education that you get with teachers is so important. And I think, like, you talked about this a little bit, even with the teacher that had the drum kit, and you've brought him up a lot in our relationship.
Formative person in my life.
Yeah, and I think that those people are also just as important to your relationship with art. Because I think about Heather all the time, right? Like, I think about when I'm listening to something, or when I see something in a museum, or when I go to a show, I'm like, oh, I would love to tell Heather about this, right? And I mean, when we go back to Saskatoon, we get together with her and that kind of thing, right? So it's like, yeah, I feel like that's super important too, because the community of art is a lot more important, I would say, to be able to enjoy it the way that you do.
Yeah, exactly. I think that, so like there's maybe it's a cliche to talk about like, well, what's the importance of art? Well, it's the human experience and whatever. And people do say that a lot. And I think that the meaning of that has been kind of like diluted. But to delve into that a bit more deeply, what's human about it? One of the things, at least, is that the human experience is simultaneously private and communal, you know, and those two realities are kind of at odds with each other by definition, right? The private individual experience is by definition not public and not communal, but you can't, they seem to like, they work off of each other in that really fascinating kind of way.
Well, I think about even the way that our relationship started is that it was really through a love of music.
Yeah, that's true.
Because, I mean, we went on our first date because you asked if you could play music in my car because I bought a new car.
And we did like bond over music.
Yeah, very quickly. And then we started going to the record store every week together and doing like playing music together and talking about music and talking about our experience with playing music and then loving music, right? And the different styles of music that we loved, talking about our concerts that we had been to, right? Like, I mean, I brought up, like, my dad brought me to Black Sabbath when I was 13, right? And it's like, that's so cool. But then at the same time, like, I would go to classical concerts by myself and I would talk about that, right? So it's like, we were able to connect over the fact that we both love it.
Yeah. Yeah. But still, there's the individual, like, we both experience things differently and have different, like, like, inarticulatable inarticulate. I don't know how to, but like experience of things. But there's still that like drive to say, like when you read a book that you really enjoyed, or there's a new album out or something, like you want to share it with people and you want to talk to people about it.
I think that leads into a good point too, that both of us also have a love of writing. And you did a Master's of English. That's really what brought us to London.
Yeah.
And then now you've really started writing poetry and screenplays.
And screenwriting, yeah. And the thing is that's really interesting about that, like with the academic side, which I've done a lot of work in the academic side when it comes to art. And so if you think about it, there's like the entire institution of the humanities, and specifically like the English departments around the world, are founded on the idea of collectively discussing and having a dialogue about a piece of work, about art, about writing. And it's like, again, it's a highly structured process. Like the criticism of literature it's a highly structured step-by-step process of like how do we talk about art, right? And that tells you something about how difficult it is. I think is the fact that you can do a master's degree and a PhD, and I want to do a PhD in this, and like the nuances and the differences and the depth of thought that comes from the process of simply trying to like discuss a piece of art with other people, and the amount of like mental energy that takes to just simply talk about this thing. Even with like music, like I can read music really at a rudimentary level, but you've studied music and like music theory and that's been around for centuries. And that's what is that? It's a way of talking about sound, right? What and
one of the things that actually on that point too is like I learned the Western theory and everything of music, and that's something that I would love to dip my toes into a little bit more, is learning the Eastern, like, or some of the, because I mean there's a couple of different kind of areas with that, but like they use quarter tones as well, not just half tones, which is amazing to me, because then I'm like, oh my gosh, then you hop into a whole different group of harmony, and
it's a different scale
entirely. And I'm like, that's so cool, so it's like I spent like decades doing piano theory and that kind of thing, but that was only part of the story, right? And it's like, okay, so I only know, what I know about certain parts of music, right? So it's like, okay, that's so cool that I can hop into other areas. And I mean, you've really kind of opened my eyes more to like metal music and that kind of thing. And the theory and the technical elements of that. And I'm able to appreciate that a lot more. So I think that that's something when people ask me what's my favorite genre of music or what's my favorite type of music, that's like the hardest question in the entire world.
Isn't that the question though? Like,
well,
what music do you like?
I don't know. I like everything.
I like everything.
True, I do. I mean, I also love country music that's like specific. I don't necessarily like the, trucks and girls country music, but like,
sure,
but I also don't really like the like drugs and girls trap music either. There's those sorts of stuff that I'm like, I don't know if that's really for me. But then I also, will go to concerts that are way out of my zone, and I still love them and appreciate them and whatever, right? But I think that also happens with writing. I've been trying to read a lot more fiction over the last little while, because I really spent a long time reading a lot of memoirs, and I think that now being able to expand on that has been really good. Yeah, I think we'll cut that out and try again here. Okay, what do we want to talk about for the last 5 minutes? We should talk about why we decided to do the podcast.
Okay.
So 3, 2, 1.
So I wanted to kind of come back real quick to what And maybe we have different opinions of this.
That would be good. I think that
Maybe
we do in a way.
Yeah. But the reason we're doing this podcast, I'll go first. I think an advantage of what we're doing here, and hopefully as we get more of an audience and more traction in that, is to highlight, I'm really passionate about highlighting why we need to support the arts, and why, and like to encourage people who are maybe not, like people who are starting something, whatever kind of project it is, whether you're like any writer, painter, whatever you like, to find meaning in it, and to find the courage and the confidence to jump in and actually do it. Yeah. Because I think that there is a stigma, or there's definitely a feeling of like, maybe it's not worth it, because maybe I'm not going to make a bunch of money doing it. Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. What do you think? What's your motivation for doing this?
Well, we have a lot of really amazing conversations with people outside of the podcast. And that's one of the things that we've been really good at in our life, is surrounding ourselves by really interesting people. Very diverse, very like all sorts of, different backgrounds, different jobs, different whatever. And I think both of us are very interested in people. Mm-hmm. And that to me is something that I wanted to be able to really turn into a storytelling platform. I actually, when I first got into marketing, and I was in my first internship actually, I remember looking into doing a master's degree in journalism, because I was like, I would love to tell stories. Mm. And then I decided not to do that for a number of different reasons. But then moving forward into my marketing career, I really enjoyed the marketing side of it, but I wanted to be able to do more storytelling. And this was a way for us to do that, because I felt like we were already really good at the conversation part. And I was like, okay, so now we can tell people stories, we can get people's backgrounds out there and allow people to connect. I think that that's something that I really love, listening to stories, and I really love reading memoirs and that kind of thing. And this is another platform for people to be able to connect with people and see themselves in people who are doing something that is inspiring to them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that we're kind of contributing in a way to the community side of things, to the building, to the like humanizing, or just like adding depth and different perspectives to artists that are out there. And opening up about the process of.
Well, I think we get a lot of these stories from people, from artists, once they're like super A-list. You know what I mean? Like once they're able to be on, like, I don't know, what shows do people watch now? Like David Letterman? He has that.
Do people watch that?
Well, he has that Netflix thing.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, but like once they're on these like big talk shows and stuff, like Oprah doesn't have a show anymore. How old am I?
I don't know.
Anyways, but I feel like we get these like really A-list stories from people. And we get the whole origin story from people once they're really famous. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And once they are like already really deep into their career and whatever. And I really want to be able to tell the stories of people who are emerging, or they're like starting to see the first kind of taste of that success. You know what I mean? And that doesn't mean that they're like a year into their career. That could mean that they're 10 years into their career, 15 years into their career. But just at a point where they have like things that they're really proud of and want to share, you know, and how did they get there? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, well, I think we did a pretty good job of introducing ourselves. What do you think?
I think so. I think it's, yeah.
Yeah. This podcast has been really fun to get started.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a learning curve, you know.
For sure.
There's always going to be more to improve on and learn. But I think if we always kind of stick to that.
Well, if we can stand as an example to anybody, it's that like if we hadn't just, you bought these mics on Vinted for like a couple of pounds.
It was like 30 pounds for both mics.
Right. Yeah. And we're recording on my iPhone. Yeah. And like
we had our laptops,
we're just like diving into it. But if we hadn't, like if we'd waited to have everything perfectly aligned, and like if because people have been doing podcasts for how long?
And there's really high quality.
Yeah, there's extremely high quality. Like, and we want to be. I think we're decent. Like, we have interesting ideas and content and excellent guests. But if we waited for the stars to align, essentially, like this wouldn't happen.
We wouldn't be on episode 5.
No, and I think it's reasonable to say that at a certain point you need to just push yourself in, and then worry about. Yeah, it's that learning through experience process.
And we've done that a lot, I feel like, in our lives. I think, going back to even your drumming, is that, like, you really just, like, pushed to be able to learn. I think even with your band, pushing to be able to just get an album out and, like, working together as a team and making that happen. Even us moving to London, like, we just really kind of jumped in.
Yeah, and I think the other thing, like, to bring it back to those early examples, is like, I think it's really important to look at the stuff that you have out in whatever format and be proud of it, even if it's not the greatest thing ever, and it's not your master work or something like that. Like, because again, I'm very proud of that album, but it's not top chart 100 quality. It's never gonna be that. But I'm really proud of it. Yeah. I'm really happy about it. I listen to it and I think, like, it's for me it's an important piece of art that I enjoy still. Yeah.
That's a really good point. Good call on that.
Yeah, cheers. Yeah. Thanks. I do want to just say, like, as we kind of close out here, because we do like to do like a little promotion thing for guests, but we're the guests. And so, like, I'd really love it if our audience had things to like suggest, or if there's certain like things that you want to see on here.
If you have any guests that you would love to see on the podcast that live in London, that would be amazing. Yeah. We've got a really full lineup over the next.
Live in London or close enough to London. Yeah,
but moving forward, we're planning on doing this for the long haul. So that's very exciting.
And like, if there's like, we're really interested in what you guys have to say. And
comment. Let us know.
Comment and
send us a message.
But like sincerely, like I sincerely mean that is if there's something we've talked about on an episode that you want to hear more about, or if there's ideas that, like, we have a guest on and you're like, I really want you to ask them these kinds of questions because I'm super interested in this. Like, we will do that. We're very much here to have the conversations that you guys are interested in listening to.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for listening. Mm-hmm. Not to be too salesy, but subscribe to our YouTube, our Spotify, follow us on Instagram, we're on TikTok, the whole 9 yards. We do a lot more like behind the scenes on TikTok. We have our new exclusives on YouTube are out now. Mm-hmm. So that's exciting. And yeah.
Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.
So exciting. See you next week.